Hey, property managers are the lifeblood of your company. If you don't have a good one, I don't care how amazing your pro forma is, it won't be a success because you've got the wrong manager company. If we're the quarterbacks as the asset managers, they're your offensive line. And so if you don't have a good offensive line, it doesn't matter. You can have Tom Brady as the quarterback. He's not going to do anything.
It is a common saying amongst real estate investors that you make money when you buy, not when you sell. While this catchy phrase has value, it fails to convey how easy it is to lose money through poor property management. Whether you self-manage or hire a professional, it is important to understand how to navigate the common pitfalls and challenges with rental properties without losing your shirt or your mind. That's why you have tuned in to Maximizing Your Property Value, the apartment owner's guide to operating rental properties as a successful business. I'm your host, John Stiles, real estate agent and team leader of the VIP Real Estate Group at Bridge Realty. As a current multifamily investor and former property manager myself, I understand the headaches and difficulties of keeping an investment property from becoming a money pit and time sucker. It takes a solid business plan, it takes tested systems, and it takes key team members to actually find success. So let's take a deep dive and maximize your property value. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Maximizing Your Property Value. I'm your host, John Stiles, and I'm so happy that you have joined us today. I'm also excited to introduce to you today's guest, who is Joseph Bramante. Joseph, thanks for coming on the show today.
Hey, John, glad to be here.
So a little bit about Joseph. Joseph is the co-founder of TriArc Real Estate Partners, a wholly integrated multifamily investment company with the goal of acquiring over 20,000 units in the next 10 years. Joseph graduated with his bachelor's degree in civil engineering from Louisiana Tech University and spent 5 years working for ExxonMobil in their capital project division. His multifamily real estate investing started in 2011 when he purchased his first multifamily property sight unseen, all while working as a business team lead for ExxonMobil in Papua New Guinea. Shortly thereafter, Joseph joined a local real estate education club where he met his business partners, Carrie, Breneman, and Deborah Newsome. Together, they grew a portfolio of over 1,100 units and have increased the NOI on average by over 80% within 48 months of every property they have acquired. So, Joseph, can you do us a favor and fill in some of maybe the holes in the background and let us know, how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, so uh, we've kind of really specialized on the value add, the true heavy value add deals. And my first deal, really just kind of fell into my lap as far as the value add component. Um, Bought that one sight unseen, as you'd mentioned, and was still living abroad. And I didn't have the luxury of all these podcasts that your listeners have today. I had to do it the old-fashioned way. I bought a couple of books, read them, taught myself through reading those books, and that was it. I had a broker. We went, found some deals, bought that first one, and 3 months later, I'm stepping foot on it for the first time, and went through a real roller coaster on that first deal. 6 months into it, we're negative cash flowing. We're 85% occupied. We got asbestos on the property. We've got fraudulent insurance, and then and to cap it all off, I'd lost my job. So I was in a really bad spot on that first deal, and luckily was able to turn the whole thing around. And the solution was to just go big and do this massive 30,000 per door renovation when our original budget was only about 3,000. So kind of fast forward after some much success on that first one, started repeating that on other ones. So then I kind of got a taste for doing these big value add deals and went on to do I think the next deal was like a 22,000 a door rehab. Then we did a 15,000 a door, and then gradually started getting smaller. And then most recently, now we're doing a 37,000 per door current renovation. So we've, I don't want to say we've mastered it, but we've certainly got some significant skills on that heavy value add component that I find that most people just don't they just don't do it. It's A lot of times you hear people say value add or heavy value add, and they're quoting numbers like 10 or 12,000 a door, and that's nah, I wouldn't really consider that value add compared to we're going in and moving walls and adding washers and dryers and new roofs and adding central ACs. So we do the bigger stuff, but also those are becoming harder and harder to come by.
Yeah, that
So
makes
so
sense.
so anyway, that's how when you hear that last bullet point, increase the NOI by 80% on all the deals you've acquired. Well, that's how you do it. You do those large value adds, and there were a couple of those that made up for the bulk of that 80% that really skewed the average up, and so that's that certainly helps. But yeah, that's you don't get those kind of stats by doing normal class B renovations where you're just going to put some paint and resurface.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I'd like to learn more about, you know, the process that you went through when buying that property sight unseen. First of all, did that seem normal to you, or was that really a stretch for you? How did you go about it? I'm assuming you didn't have a Zoom call to see the property. How did it work out?
Yeah, I would use the word process very loosely in this in this definition because there was no process. I went and I bought it. I didn't know what due diligence was. I knew that due diligence was just a portion of the contract. That was just a phase of the contract. And so I didn't scope sewer lines. I didn't do environmental reports. I didn't do most of the things that we do now. I didn't do a lease file audit. I I just bought the property, and I don't even know what I did for 30 days, to be honest. Wasn't what I was supposed to be doing. It was mostly just probably working on securing the debt, which nowadays typically you've got the debt. Uh, at least you've got it narrowed down to a handful of lenders before you even go under contract, typically.
Mhm.
So everything was just kind of shooting from the hip, as they say, and I didn't really know what I was doing. Got into that first one, and also just caveat that it was 2011. It was 25,000 a door. Cap rates were over 10%.
Mm.
So I was fortunately I was able to make those kind of mistakes and be here to talk about it. I do that today, and I'm not here to talk about it. So
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
would have been the end of my career.
Yep. Different times, different markets here. Um, and you talked about how the value add you were planning was it $7,000 a door, but it turned into 33, something like that.
Yeah, it was originally just supposed to be 3,000 a door. It's 26 units, and the 3,000, the bulk of that was replacing the new roof. So like we knew the roof's going to we knew that the roofs needed to get replaced because the seller told us they need to get replaced. And I think also our PCA, property condition assessment, told us that the roofs need to get replaced. So we did that right, and we correctly budgeted that. So we got some bids for that. We'd also, the other thing we did right was we bought it in a really good location, which allowed us to recover from all the mistakes we made in the beginning, and allowed the property to, um, it allowed it to uh, be able to tolerate a 30,000 per door renovation and allow us to get the rents that we needed to have the property be a success.
Okay. Yeah, well, that's great that you were able to make a great situation out of a bad one.
Yeah, yeah, I'm
Um,
glad.
and I think you mentioned it briefly, and I think I read it previously about you that you had fraudulent insurance. Can you tell us about that so we can know how to look out for that?
I don't really know how that fully came about because I was buying it through a broker. And so the broker was a reputable company, and I don't think they were multifamily specific. And so that one of the tidbits I would say is make sure you're using somebody who only does multifamily, or at least at a minimum that they've got they come highly referred. They've done this a couple of times. My opinion is that the multifamily industry was still maturing back in 2010 and 11 when I was getting my start, and so it wasn't nearly as defined and mature as it is now. But we were using a broker, and then the company that he had hired. So the actual insurance company that he purchased for us turned out to be fraudulent.
Okay.
So it wasn't, we got some money back like 2 years later. So that brokerage ended up going after this. I think it was the brokerage or somebody. They hired an attorney, some sort of way legal action was taken against that insurance company. And we did get a refund check for the bulk of it back like 2 years later.
Okay.
But that didn't really help us in the present moment where we were in the middle of hurricane season, which is, a pretty big deal in the south region. And it's very difficult to get an insurance policy during hurricane season if you don't already have one in place.
Yeah.
So it's one thing to have a policy expire and you're going to to a new policy, but it's something else if you're currently with no insurance and you already own the property. So now it just opens up a lot of questions for the insurance company, and you become a high risk policy for them.
Yeah, because they're probably worried about the time, if there were any claims that resulted from a time that you were uncovered or
Exactly.
not covered. So,
Yeah.
okay,
So
well,
it's a tricky industry, and yeah, I learned a decent amount about it. Got my feet wet. No expert by any stretch of the definition, but I do know that going forward, not having insurance on a property is a very bad thing.
right. Yeah. Okay. Well, and it's good to know, you've recovered from that, or you used all that as a learning experience, and you've taken down several properties since. So what I want to kind of get into in this podcast is some of the processes and systems that you've developed in order to, do well in your company, and things that we all can learn from and apply to our own properties, and to maximize our property values. So first of all, I'm really intrigued by the idea of increasing the NOI on average by over 80%. And you've mentioned, there's a couple of properties that skewed that percentage, but nonetheless, what are some strategies that you look towards in order to accomplish that? How do you achieve that?
Yeah, so we stick to value add properties. We don't go after these marginal deals for a couple of reasons. One is it gives you an extra security as far as, if you're going after a marginal deal just to close a deal, which, some people will do just to, collect fees and whatnot. What happens on those deals is if they're off by even a little bit, if it was, a 16% IRR deal and they were banking all their upside on just doing, just increasing the rent, and there was really nothing they can do physically to the property to make it significantly better than the competition to command those rents, that would be a very marginal deal. So when they get in there and they make a push for the rents and they don't get them, you just shot the entire pro forma for the next 5 years, and so it won't be able to perform. So we typically go after deals that are going to be where there's either some physical component that we can do, where we're spending typically at least $10,000 a door to get it up to par with the competition, or there's some sort of operational efficiency. So a recent example of the operational efficiency one is where we bought a 2015 construction property just last year, and it was located right next to another one of our properties. So the operational efficiency for us was to decrease the payroll by having a single manager overseeing both properties, and we're also able to share the maintenance staff between the two properties. So our operational efficiency was decreasing the expense on the payroll side, which was a guaranteed item to happen. Plus, there were a few other items that we were going to do just on the kind of other income side, finding other ways to generate income on the property. So I think those are also some of the tricks that we do. It's not only just on the interior, but you've got this whole list of things you can add to a property to increase its revenue. And whenever we look at a new property, we just go down our list of proven upgrades that we can do to increase the revenue that we've done on other properties. and we check the ones that this one doesn't have, and we say, okay, well, we're going to do these, and then we build that into the model, and that's kind of how we are able to further show upside on the value add portion.
Yeah. Well, that makes a lot of sense. I'm kind of seeing two paths that you're referencing. One is the physical improvements to the property, and then also you've talked about it, you've referenced it as the operational efficiency of the property. And having payroll that's unnecessary, obviously that's a huge expense. Um, and just having proper systems within the management team, I think will be really important as well.
Yeah.
Um, do you have any more comments about that there?
I would say another one, which is a very challenging item, is the marketing. A lot of times you'll come across properties, or sorry, maybe not a lot of times, but it's not it's not unheard of to come across properties that would just have these huge marketing budgets, or the opposite. They're not spending any marketing dollars, and they don't understand why their rent's not going up. So you really want to critique the marketing line item, figure out, okay, well, what are you spending money on? And that's when it really pays to know your market and to know what works and what doesn't work. And those, that kind of knowledge, it just comes with experience.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of companies that do marketing out there, and you can very easily spend a lot of money on marketing and not get a whole lot of results for it. And we've been down that road. We've been through numerous marketing companies, and we've spent tens of thousands of dollars with numerous companies to try and, we're always testing companies out, try and find an edge and find a way to generate more traffic and get people through the door. And so by having gone through all that, when we see those companies that either didn't work or whatever on new properties that we're looking at buying, well, it's an easy adjustment for us to make. It's okay, we're going to make these adjustments to the marketing line item. And sometimes it's a saving, and sometimes that's an increase. And the times that it's an increase, it should also be an increase on the revenue side from what we've experienced on other properties. So that would be the other thing you can look at, is on the marketing budget.
Okay.
And
So
then one other item is on the kind of the admin. The admin line item is kind of the catch-all for expenses, and you will just see all kinds of weird and crazy things in there that sometimes uh, are just, if you're buying it from a mom and pop operator, they're going to have stuff in there that really shouldn't be in there. That should be way below the line. That's truly just their cost. And when you find those items, that's great, because that's truly just extra revenue for you, because you'll be able to easily go in there and cut that out. But for us, we use a VoIP telephone system, which is significantly less expensive than a standard kind of hard line phone system, which a lot of the older properties would have. And it's not going to move the needle a lot. You're talking maybe a couple $100 a month, but all these little things that you can do across a property, you can shave off money here and there. It all helps towards the greater goal. And then the other item I would say is the management software you use. So we're in a unique situation that we were one of the first companies in I believe Texas, but for sure Houston, that was using Resman. And so because of that, we got grandfathered in with a great management agreement with them. So our cost to operate properties on a per unit basis is a lot less than others on the management side, and that can be a big. I mean, that's thousands of dollars a month that typically on most properties we're looking at. So we've got an edge there that we look at, and so that one may not be applicable to most other operators or people getting started in the industry, but there is going to be some component of that if you know that they're using a very premium management software because some sales guy made a good pitch to them and they signed up for it and they bought every little bell and whistle and not really needing it. And then you're able to go in and with a different management software, or maybe even just the same one, but completely scale it back to only have the features that you need it to have, because you can spend a lot of money on management software if you're not careful.
yep, that's a good point there. Um, I want to go back briefly to the marketing point. So, as you have tested different options, different strategies, what have you come to as, your go-to marketing strategy um, to be cost effective and, effective at getting people in the door.
This is a common debate that we'll have internally because my two partners have been doing property management for 30 years. And so they're very old school, 30 years each. They started off as leasing agents back in the 80s, and they've been doing this for a while, and they've seen every little thing come and go. And we're always pushing the envelope. Sorry, I'm always pushing them to try and every little marketing thing that comes across my desk. And more often than not, it's just boots on the ground that typically wins. It's them getting out there with the old school flyers and getting in front of people that brings in more traffic than everything that we've tried. And it gets hard to justify the cost, the cost per lead and cost per lease when you're on these items that you're spending, but they're important. Um, I know apartments.com has, we use them. We've actually gone back and forth with them because we got away from them for a while, and then we tried a bunch of other stuff. Now we're going back towards them. And because now they got these other programs, they've got I believe it's called the Diamond program or Diamond Plus, which for us is useful in that we can use it to get leased up. Basically, you're paying double what the normal cost is, but you're guaranteed to be in the top three of the list. So that's unique in that you get a lot of traffic from that approach. The other thing we're doing is we're working on having all of our properties on a single website. So we're going to have our TriArc website with all the properties there as its own kind of listing service versus each property being its own website. So individually, those websites are not nearly as strong as a single website with all the properties on them, because also you're able to keep it all in house as far as what the resident or future resident would see, versus when you're doing like an apartments.com, they're showing the resident every property around them and giving them other ideas and whatnot. And so they're almost working against you in some regard. So you gotta be a bit careful with that. But one of the things that we do have a good bit of success with, because we do have a heavily Hispanic profile on a lot of our properties, is we use a service called Green Sheets. And there's another one, I forget the name of it, but it's a free publication that caters to the Hispanic market. And I'm sure other markets have a similar service, but again, it's hard copy, it's print materials, and it's that old school style of marketing that still works. It still works very well. And I know there's a big push for people to go online, do everything via social and whatnot. And maybe we're just doing it wrong. I don't know. But for us, we tend to have the better results just by, boots on the ground. And to our credit, or my management team's credit, for this past collection with all of the COVID and everything going around, we've collected over 95% collections across 14 properties. So we've done okay, and I can't really fault them so much. They've definitely earned a lot of kudos for that. So I have a hard time justifying these other marketing companies when, again, they're just doing the boots on the ground and seems to work just fine.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this marketing discussion could be, had in any business. I know for me as a real estate agent here in the Minneapolis, Minnesota area, obviously agents are going a lot with their marketing online, social media, but there's nothing that compares to, having a one-to-one conversation with somebody in person, or maybe talking to somebody on the phone. There's just a different level of connection that you can have with somebody, and it can go a long ways.
Yeah. And I would say resident referrals are a good source as well. So I think people need to, use your residents to help bring other residents. It works, and it's still going to be a lot cheaper than most other marketing programs are going to be using. So there's a whole suite of tactics that are really just the old school way of doing. And I would encourage people to, while researching all these new marketing companies, don't forget to check out the old ones that still work.
Yep, makes sense. Okay, well, let's go back briefly to the topic of your renovations. And, you know, obviously you want to avoid spending too much money. How do you decide what your budget should be when you're initially looking at the property? And secondly, kind of how do you manage that on an ongoing basis to make sure you're not having too many overruns?
Yeah, absolutely. So for the first part of your question, I would say you start with the end in mind. So you really have to know what the end objective is for that property. We've got some properties that the end objective is we're scraping it or redeveloping it into some sort of mixed use development. We've got two like that. We've got others where we get in, we renovate, and we sell in 3 years. So you really have to know what the outcome is and uh, not over renovate. And the way we've discovered how to not over renovate is unfortunately just through experience. So by doing these rehabs and you're able to quantify, okay, when I do this, I get this much rent pop. I'm going to do this, I get that much rent pop. And then knowing the kind of service life you have of the building itself. So for example, we're doing a 37,000 per door renovation right now. And one of the things that we're doing that we're actually challenging our own self on is we went in with the plan to do a complete repipe, and we're currently repiping the whole property, which is about 5,000 a door, about $1 million just in replumbing.
Wow.
But what we're discovering as we're going through this is, I'm looking and inspecting all of the pipes that are being cut and removed off the property, and looking on the level of corrosion and clog and sedimentation they have inside them. And then also talking with other plumbers and whatnot who aren't on the project and incentivized to say, yes, let's do the project. And so what we are exploring on, at least on the plumbing side, is do we really need to be replacing this plumbing, and what is the service life of the plumbing? And what I've discovered through my own research is that galvanized piping actually has a service life of 80 to 100 years. So I know everybody talks bad about galvanized piping, and it's really going to be market dependent, what kind of water that they have in that municipality. Whether it's in hard water, obviously is the worst on pipes. But what we're discovering through our own research is that it's okay to have a 1970s or 60s property with galvanized piping. I've got one that's a Class A property with the old original pipes. Now you're going to have, so it really just depends on what is the profile you're going to. If you're going to a really high-end profile like we are, there are certain components to, or I guess not components, but there are certain things that profile is looking for. And I can tell you that when they turn the water on, if the first little bit of water they get is brown because of the pipes being old, not that there's anything wrong with the brown water, but that initial, when you turn on an old house, when you turn the water on an old house, that initial bit of water tends to be a bit brown. They wouldn't go for that, and you would probably get a lot of negative comments on it. So you've really got to know who the profile is for what you're targeting, and most profiles would be okay with having that water, but for us, we're going for really high end. So that's kind of an internal struggle we're having: is do we not do this full repipe, and because right now we're doing PEX, which PEX is great, but it's expensive. The other thing I would say is on the other stuff that we're doing. So for example, one is resurfacing. So we're a bit different on the resurface because I've done a lot of resurfacing, and we still own those properties today that we've resurfaced. And what ends up happening is you spend the money or you don't spend the money really, because resurfacing is cheap. And so you do it because it's cheap, and you're really saving a lot of money from actually replacing the counter. So you save the money up front by doing the resurface.
Can you define what you mean resurfacing? You're talking about the countertops, or what else?
Yeah, so resurfacing is basically a high-end paint that you put on top of the counters. So it's typically when you see that speckled look, where it's a Formica counter, which has the nice rounded kind of corners, non-stone, that is compressed fabricated wood, or composite wood. Typically it's a laminate. When it's installed new, it's just a laminate counter. And then as it wears and it gets cuts on it, then the alternative, the cheap fix for it, is to resurface it, basically paint it. and they'll put some speckle in it so that it looks like kind of simulated granite, but it's still just that same Formica counter below. But the problem with that resurface is it only lasts typically 1, maybe 2 turns. So meaning you're going to have 2 leases for that 1 turn, for that 1 resurface, and then you got to do it again. And so now each additional time you're doing it, you're not paying for that out of capital dollars, you're paying for that out of operational dollars. And so we've already experienced this on other properties that didn't have resurfacing, and then we resurfaced them, and we saw the operating expense go up on them, 2 years later, 3 years later, because now we're having to resurface all those counters over again that previously were not resurfaced. And so had we just replaced the counter in the beginning with the new Formica counter, it would have been okay. Or even better, just replace it with a granite counter or some sort of cheap stone, which you don't have to do granite. There's a lot of hard stone materials out there you can use that look good and are cost effective, but still more expensive than Formica. And so I think that one of the mistakes people make is they will go for the short term and not think of, well, yeah, in the long term, in 3-4 years, I just increased my expenses, which decreased my NOI, and so it hurt my overall objective, because the NOI over the cap rate over the NOI, or that valuation approach, will have a much greater impact on value than saving a little bit of money up front on the capital dollars.
Yep.
And typically what we see on the price difference is it's about 3 to 4 times the cost to go with a new Formica counter versus just a resurface. It really depends on the size of the unit, how long the counter links are, etc. And then a little bit more expensive, probably 5 to 6 times if you're going with some sort of stone product. But that's just kind of thinking of, okay, what is the end goal here? I'm trying to increase the NOI. So you need to be careful that the capital that you're spending not only has a good impact on the income and allows you to increase income, but it doesn't also increase the expense, thus decreasing the NOI, because then they can offset each other. You might have increased the income, but then you offset the expense as well. So it didn't really move the needle, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So that's one of the things we look at. Roofs is another one. I know TPO roofs are very common to replace, but they're kind of like the Mercedes of roofs. And if you're a hold period, for us, for example, we did one in 2015 where we knew it was a scrape. The property was a scrape. We're going to go vertical with it probably once it's finished its life cycle. So we didn't want to have a roof that's going to last for 30 years when we're going to be scraping it in 10. So you just got to make sure you put a roof on there that gives you enough timeline to get to the finish line, instead of, now we're going to be scraping it and the roof we have on there is still really nice and good and has a lot of life left on it. So that would have been an example of wasted dollars. Trying to think of some other ones. I'll say the cabinets are another. A lot of times people, and this gets back to resurfacing, they'll resurface cabinets, which can really actually hinder a property if not done right. And so what we do is we tend to just replace cabinet fronts because it's a lot cleaner look. Because your cabinets are, the actual cabinet front, meaning the door of the cabinet, is what gets the most wear on it. That's what you're constantly reaching and grabbing and touching and cleaning and everything like that. So over time, it gets the most wear. And to do a resurface on it, the cabinets will stick. When you close them, they'll stick, and they'll pull the paint off the box whenever you open them. And so what we tend to do, again, depends on the property and the profile. And what we're trying to do is we really try to, if we're going to do anything to the cabinet, we try to at least replace the fronts and not repaint them, because again, the repainting doesn't last as long. What we will repaint is we'll take off all the fronts and we'll paint the boxes. We've had a lot of success of just painting the boxes and then putting new cabinet fronts on there. But we'll really try not to paint the cabinet fronts. And sometimes as an upgrade, if we take over a property that has painted cabinet fronts, we'll replace it with new cabinet fronts because it just looks better. And then I would say the last value add that we do, which again is a bit more on the expensive side, but washer and dryers. I think you can't credit enough the value of adding a washer and dryer to a unit, and you really need to go out of your way to try and find a way to add washers and dryers, especially in today's demographic. I mean, current renter profile and population is a bit spoiled. They're all millennials. They come up with their parents. They've had everything, and now you're trying to ask this profile to go and use a laundromat. Come on, they've probably never even seen a laundromat before, and now they're moving into these properties and they don't have a washer and dryer in their unit. And so I get that it's expensive, and I would say just really work on bidding it out to as many people as you can to find a good GC that can install it, because it's a complex installation. It's got both a plumbing and an electrical component to it. And sometimes on these old properties, the breaker isn't large enough, and you have to add another circuit just to accommodate that washer and dryer, because it requires a lot of electricity. So for those installations, I mean, it's going to be your bigger expense. It can be as high as $5,000 a door, total install, including the appliance, and as low as $1,500. It really just depends on where you're at, what the price is. Other things you can do is you don't necessarily have to buy the washer and dryers, so you can lease them from a appliance company, and then they will then be completely responsible for all the maintenance on that equipment, and then you then charge the resident back for leasing the washer and dryer. Because sometimes residents do have washers and dryers. It's not as common, but sometimes they do have washers and dryers. And so you don't necessarily want to force it on them all the time, but it can be a revenue generator for you if you're leasing it for $30 and you're charging it back to the resident for 40, or 50, whatever. You've made 10, $20 per month just on adding that washer and dryer. Plus you've got some inherent increase in the rent just because you've got washer and dryer units. And so if they're looking at your property versus 3 others, and you're the only one with washer and dryer, there's going to be a significant reason or significant chance that they're going to lease your unit over the others, because again, washers and dryers are, they're almost a necessity these days.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate all those. Those are a lot of great examples of some specific things to look for when you're doing a renovation, and also even just typical turns, whether or not you're going to resurface something or replace it. And it sounds like it takes a lot of knowledge and experience as to, for example, what is the life expectancy of something, of a certain product. You mentioned the pipes, for example, or what is the lifespan of a resurface. If somebody is not super familiar with these details, what do you think is the best way that they can educate themselves so that they make the right decision at their renovation?
Well, I mean, I'll just tell them. I mean, a resurface is going to last you 1 to 2 turns. But for other items, yeah, that's talk to a GC. Ask them. I think that's a question that's not asked, often enough. So much of the focus is, okay, how much rent increase can I get for this? But then the other question is, okay, well, what is the lifespan of this, whatever I'm installing? Or how many turns can I expect to get out of this? So we've seen it a lot with flooring. A lot of people have already switched to hard flooring because of that very reason. It's a lot more durable. Vinyl planks, very commonplace now. You can go in and you can install a complete vinyl plank system, and it's a little bit more expensive up front, but you're not changing out carpets anymore. So, and then the replacement on those is, if you get a scratch on one plank, you just rip it up, put one more plank down. You're not replacing the whole floor. So really, it just comes down to talking with your GC, knowing what's available in your market, and the items that you're really going to be talking about that, in my experience, have the kind of that life component to it that you'd want to consider is the resurfacing, is the roofs, it's going to be your drives. If you're redoing driveways, you can do a cheap overlay, sorry, it's not overlay. It's called I forget. Basically, they're just repainting it almost where it's black again, resealing it. Sorry, they can do a reseal of an existing asphalt, and that they can talk to you about how long it'll last, and depending on where you're at, it'll last longer than others. Like for us in Houston, we have a lot of heat. That summer can really wear out an asphalt, whereas up north it might be different. I don't know. I'm not no expert, but I am a civil engineer, so I do know that. Uh, the environment will have a different effect on the different concretes you use. So you'd want to look at those different things. Um, and then wood fences, I'd say, is another. A lot of times, it's, when you're doing an exterior paint or you're doing adding wood fences, you want to say, well, what's the lifespan for this? How often am I going to be going back and replacing this? And if you're using treated versus untreated wood, we embarrassingly, not for us, but for the owner, they built this that 2015 property we bought. They didn't use treated wood around the window frames. And so we're walking in, we're looking at all the trim, and all the trim is rotting. And we're like, this was built 4 years ago. And why is there wood rot within 4 years? Because they used the wrong wood. And it's just like that. If you're cutting corners, or you're not using the right type of wood for your projects, and I've seen this on actual rehabs where people have done a rehab and it looks beautiful, right? It's gorgeous, the best rehab you've ever done. Has a whole lot of nice wood accents on the exterior, but they used the wrong wood. It wasn't treated wood, and now they're getting ready to sell the property and it's all rotting. It looks like crap. And so now a new owner is going to have to go in and replace that wood. So it's important that you're making the right choices, especially when it comes to wood, when you're doing any of these kind of decorations.
Yeah, that's a great point. I want to shift the conversation a little bit here to the management side of the business, and that being, as a owner, you have the choice, of course, to manage the property yourself. You could hire a third-party property manager, or you could kind of build your own management company within. So, what route have you taken with those options?
So here's my thoughts on that. I know that. Uh, so when I got started in 2011, actually formed a company, or at least the framework for the company in 2012, and we officially became a company in 2013. But we were, as far as I knew, we were a bit pioneering in that we brought management in-house by joint venturing with a company that was in its own right a third-party manager company. So the way it worked out is I was forming my company at the same time that this manager company, my two partners, had broken off from a much larger management company and decided to do their own thing. And so just very fortunate that our paths crossed and that the timing all worked out. And so we joint ventured together. So they still did their own thing and I did my own thing, but on projects, we had a joint venture agreement to GP deals. And so we were, I was giving up equity to have a management in-house, so to speak. And then later on, we officially merged fully. But so we went that route. And the reason I went that route instead of trying to be the expert at property management is because property management is it's hard. I mean, I know people think that it can be easy, but you're dealing with people's personal lives, with their living space. There's a lot of rules and regulations around it, and depending, especially as you go across the country and you try and go in other cities and states, they've got their own special rules that apply. And just the headache that comes with dealing with property management, it's a very time intensive industry, and also from a profitability standpoint, it's typically a marginal business. If you've got a property management company that's making a lot of money, they're probably doing something not right. They're either probably not hiring when they need to be hiring, and so they're kind of overstretched, or they're just probably charging way too much. So who knows? But typically it's a marginal business. They're not huge profit makers for you. And so to go into that myself, I just didn't really have the inclination to it. And the other is, it's not my skill set. So my skill set is on the business side, is on the underwriting side, is kind of the big picture side of the industry. And so I was, looking for properties to buy and heavily leveraging my in-house operational team to vet our own underwriting and my own underwriting assumptions to make sure that I'm not coming up with some crazy ideas that, like increasing rent $200 and doing this rehab over 12 months and, but only dropping vacancy by 5%. So, it's really important that even if you don't have operations in-house, that when you're doing any kind of pro forma, you've got a trusted management company that you're using to vet your own assumptions, because they'll tell you point blank, this will work and this won't work. But again, back to just a caveat that there are management companies out there that are hungry for business, and they're just going to be yes men. They're just going to tell you yes to everything, that every crazy idea you tell them about your pro forma, and you got to watch out for that also. So it's a dangerous world out there in syndication. You've really got to be kind of careful, and every direction you go, there's somebody out there trying to take advantage almost. But that's the challenge of the industry, right?
Yeah. Well, that's a neat approach that you've taken. It's been an integration of having management in-house, but not really having to do much of it yourself because you're focused on your skills and passions, while leveraging skills and passions that your partners have.
Yeah.
So,
And don't get me wrong, I'm managing the operations side. We have weekly reports that they're coming to me, and I do. So jokingly, most of the arguments that we have as a company are typically when Joseph, tries to start doing operations, and I come up with these great operational ideas. Sometimes I see other podcast guys talk about things they're doing. I'm like, oh wow, that's a great idea, and I go and try and push this on them, and then they remind me of why they're so good at what they do, and they're like, no, this won't work for that reason, whatever. And but typically the rub comes if I get to be a little too aggressive and just push this idea, and sometimes it works, but then sometimes it doesn't. And I'd say I'm kind of like 50-50 success rate right now of the different things we've tried. And but they're great, they're flexible, they're at least accommodating to say, okay, fine, we don't think it's going to work, we'll try a crazy idea, and we at least try it. So there is a dialogue that's going on, and between the asset management and the property management companies, as far as keeping up with what's going on. Because I'll say that's one of the things that you've got to be kind of aware of, is that when you partner with people that are very experienced, one of the downsides of that is that they're going to be hesitant, or they're going to be likely to just continue doing what they've been doing for the past 30 years. So they're going to be hesitant to try new things. And that's where you, as the asset manager, or even as whatever your position is, if you're the younger guy in the group, you want to stay out in the forefront and keep aware of what new technologies are coming up, and constantly just prodding them and pushing them to try and do different things. And typically they're going to be receptive to that. And the other thing is that, again, as I mentioned earlier, property management is very labor intensive. They're super busy all the time. It's got a very heavy accounting component to it. So they're spending a lot of time just reconciling accounts, managing people issues. Right now, they're managing this COVID crisis, and it's a very hands-on kind of management style you have to do on property management. And so they don't have a lot of time necessarily to look at all these new technologies, let alone to try them. So part of my role is kind of like the chief technology officer. I'm going out and I'm vetting some of these things, because I've developed a decent amount of operational experience over the years just by being around them, and for the last 10 years, and seeing all the properties we've gone through, and I know what works and what doesn't work, and I've heard all the stories, and so I'm able to vet different technologies from the operational side, at least 1 or 2 stages of vetting before I present it to them to say, hey, I've looked at this for a couple of weeks, a couple of months, had a couple of conversations with them. I think it'll work for this reason. I've already thought about this reason why it won't work, whatever. So I think that that's kind of the other thing that we do in my role. I do in my role, not just you do your thing and I'll do my thing. I'm very much involved.
Yeah. You know, so I personally have a background in property management, and so I can concur that it is kind of a thankless job. It's nonstop. It's constantly putting out fires and responding to concerns. So you're right. It can be difficult for a property manager to take the time that's needed, and not that they don't want to, but it just you don't have the time to research new options or new opportunities.
Yeah.
So it's good to have both things going on, and people kind of doing the research and trials and be able to report what's a good option to change to. So
Yeah. Hey, property managers are the lifeblood of your company. If you don't have a good one, I don't care how amazing your pro forma is, it won't be a success because you've got the wrong manager company. They're your, if we're the quarterbacks as the asset managers, they're your offensive line. And so if you don't have a good offensive line, it doesn't matter. You can have Tom Brady as the quarterback. He's not going to do anything.
it's great. Um, so are there how do you have things set up in your company as far as routine meetings and reporting so that you can make sure you're staying on the same page and monitoring some kind of key performance indicators and making sure that you're headed in the right direction?
Yeah, so we've got weekly reporting on our properties, and that's really the heartbeat of what's going on a weekly basis. Um, and then we've got our on the monthly reporting. We actually that's more of the property manager side. So they're checking on the monthly reporting. We're checking for variances across our budgets of what we set. But then a real heavy push is done on the quarterly reporting side. So on the quarterly reports is where we go ahead and we reforecast every quarter for the end of the year. We look at all the metrics because I think on a monthly basis, you got to be careful because you can have a good month or a bad month, and then you are inspired or panicked into making some action when really it was just a bad month. Necessarily there's nothing you could have changed or done differently, but now you've just gotten yourself all wound up over one data point. And so that's why we tend to put a big emphasis on quarterly reporting because now you've got 3 months. You can see a trend of something happening bad for 3 months. And again, that also depends if you have to use your own judgment as far as if this is a major item like a water line broke, or if it's just, the kind of the noise of property management. So you have to, on a monthly basis, decide what's noise and what's a water line break. Typically, you're not having many water line breaks that often, and I'm using that as an analogy. And so that way, on a quarterly basis, we've got trending data that we're looking at as far as we're to see how the different expense items are trending, if we're going to hit our forecast for end of the year. So that's what we're doing on a quarterly. And then on a monthly, like I mentioned, we've got weekly reports, and we've got all of our weekly reports tied together. So all the properties tied together for one master report, which then we've come up with a scoring system, which we've used to rank the different properties. So on a weekly basis, our properties are ranked from 1 to 14, and all the managers get to see where their rank is. So we've got complete transparency internally with the managers, just to form a little bit of competition, just so nobody wants to be at the bottom. And we also track how many weeks that they're at the different spots, and we set bonuses based on those. So we've tied some compensation with just the normal competitive nature of our team to get the job done. So I think for us, weekly is where we spent a lot of our effort, is getting that weekly report right. And I would say, areas where I've seen people go wrong on this is, there's a common phrase that says what gets tracked gets managed. And that's true. But also there's another phrase that says not everything that can be tracked should be tracked. So just because you can have this data point, and we do fee management as well as owner management. So we're managing our own account, but then also we do have a couple of owners that we manage for on a typical portfolio basis. And so we've seen their version of management reports that we don't necessarily agree with. We think they're tracking a lot of stuff. In general, people track a lot of stuff that doesn't really bring a lot of value, and all it's doing is it actually hurts your property, because now your property manager who's on site is spending hours doing this report when she could be leasing units. So I think it's very important that you get the weekly report down to just the basics, like what do you really need to know, and really be honest with yourself. And that if I didn't have this data point that I'm asking the manager to do, would that be okay? Would that be the end of the world? So I can tell you, like for us, like we track occupancy and vacancy, and we track the trend, which is for us that's a more important tracking than occupancy or vacancy, because the trend it's typically a 30 or 60-day trend depending on what the leasing agreement says, but it gives you it's kind of a leading indicator that says if you get no more leases for the next 30 or 60 days, and then everybody who's given you notice to move out and everybody who's given you notice to move in does what they say, then this is where your occupancy will be in 30 to 60 days. So it just kind of foreshadows, okay, this is where we're going. And so if the trend is up, then that's good. Versus the trend is down, then that's bad, and you better spend some money on marketing and get some more leases. So we focus on trend a lot, and then you've got your collections, which are important, and delinquency. And then, we track renewals a little bit, but it's not as, I've seen people really dive into renewal tracking a lot, which, I mean, I don't get it personally. And maybe I'm missing something, but I just feel like you're kind of wasting your time there, your manager's time, by going these really deep dives on renewals. And then I think it's important to track your marketing. Where are the leads coming from? You're spending. We just spoke earlier about marketing. Okay, well, you try a new initiative. You need to make sure you put that new initiative on your weekly report, and you can track every lease that comes in from that initiative. And so that's kind of how we've, over the years, determined what works and what doesn't work, because we can see the results. We're tracking which kind of leads we're getting from which sources. So that covers the bulk of it. So I think, there's a couple others that we track that I just can't think of right now. There's one that we also track, the rent that we're charging per units. And so, we've got our own little pricing module that we use to help review on a weekly basis. Okay, what's the occupancy or whatnot for the different floor plans, and we will make adjustments in real time to our rents for those floor plans in order to maximize the rent. So I think that's something you can actually lose a lot of money if you're not actively tracking your floor plans to see, okay, this floor plan A is just really rocking. It's 100% occupied, so I need to increase the rent on that one, but these other floor plans are lower. And so I think that's, too often we look at the occupancy as a whole instead of the occupancy as by floor plan. So when you look at it as a whole, maybe as a whole you're only at 90%. So you think, oh, I can't push rents because it's marginal. But maybe of that 90%, floor plans A and B are 100%, and those are just they're just leasing like hotcakes. And so on those floor plans, maybe your rent is actually too low, so you're able to bump the rents up on those a little bit, and maybe you can lower the rents on the others. So it's a constant kind of process. You're constantly tweaking the rents in order to just read the market dynamics of what's going on.
Yep.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. There's a lot of good things to be tracking, and it's a good point to learn to know that there's things you don't need to track. I know for my business, again, there's so many data points I could be tracking, but I myself try to put my emphasis and focus and time on the ones that I can control, for one, and the ones that I think are going to move the needle the most in my business. So.
Yeah, that's a great point, John. I think controllable and uncontrollable expenses, you can track the weather if you wanted to as well on a weekly report, but you can't control the weather. So why are you tracking it? Yep. So I think that's too often you get caught into these circles. We're all such data hogs, right? We just want all this data, and then you get all this data, and you got data overload. You can't even process it all, and at the end of the day, it just comes down to the basics again. So, I'm with you there, John. I think, so I'm curious, what do you track? You say controllable.
Well, again, so I'm
Or was there anything that you're tracking that's different than what we're tracking?
um, no, on the rental property side of things, I think it's pretty well aligned. I mean, you've got a lot more properties than I do, and I'm currently not managing for other people. So the scale of my personal portfolio is much smaller. It's harder to kind of have the tracking of a small portfolio be meaningful because there's not much again that you can change when you've just got a handful of units. Um, on my business side of things, what I can control is, I have goals related to like the number of closings that I would have, or the volume of sales that I would make. But I can't really control those. What I can control is the number of times I reach out to somebody, or the number of people that I'm reaching out to in order to build relationships, in order to lead to those transactions. So that's
Hmm.
just, a little bit different business, but the same kind of point.
Yeah, very cool. I think, so when you are doing your weekly reports, what are you using any software? Are you using a custom report you've created, like an Excel, for example, or are you using some prefabricated report that comes out of your manager software?
Yeah, I have what I call a scoreboard, and
Hmm.
it's just on an Excel spreadsheet. I've put in the numbers that matter to me. I've put those in there, and I find softwares are nice. I've used a number of different softwares and tried things
Hmm.
out, but I like how I can manipulate Excel
Yeah,
and kind of again control it.
yeah. So it's a good point on the scoreboard. We've got a scoreboard as well that we actually discussed during our leadership meeting in the morning. So before our property weekly meetings, we have our leadership meeting in the morning where we on Mondays where we talk about the company as a whole. So we're not really talking property management, we're talking TriArc. And two of the metrics on the scoreboard are related to properties. So we're checking number of properties that are less than 90%. So the answer should be zero every time. And then the other one is on I think, the Google ratings. So we actually put a good bit of emphasis on getting Google ratings and trying to make sure that they're all above a certain amount, a certain score.
Okay,
Yeah.
neat. By the way, just briefly, I really liked the idea that you said about having some internal competition between your properties. And I
Hmm.
think that's neat. I mean, we all, not all of us maybe, but most of us have a natural desire for competition, or need, or I don't know how you describe that exactly, but a responsiveness to competition. So that's neat. Maybe not right now because we're kind of running low on time, but sometime be interesting to learn more about how that looks. So,
Sure, man.
but
Yeah.
well, listen, we do need to wrap things up here. We're getting a little long, but one final topic I wanted to cover is, how do you determine when it's the right time to sell? And I know as a syndicator, you often decide that up front, as you're potentially raising money and you need to tell your investors, kind of an expectation of what the hold time would be. And then I don't know if you have any properties that are not using investors, but even for yourself, I'm up here in the Midwest where we kind of have a mindset of buy and hold forever. Not everybody does that, of course, but that's kind of the going in mindset. So again, how do you approach uh, determining the right time to sell?
Um, so yeah, as you mentioned, it's a lot of that is preset in this syndication from the beginning. So you're going into this deal with the plans of selling it in year 5 or year 7. A lot of that will also be dependent on the type of debt you have. So if you've got 5-year debt and the loan is coming due, typically it's a balloon loan. Balloon loan. And so typically that'll also dictate of when you're going to sell or refinance. So if you're exiting the market, or if your loan is coming due at a certain time, and you're ahead of that, probably 6 months ahead of that, or 6 to 9 months ahead of that, you're talking with different lenders. You're trying to say, okay, what how much refi proceeds could I get? And if in real time, you're doing that calculation, you're saying, okay, well, I can refi and I can make 100% return. And then my ongoing cash flows would be, 6%. Or I can sell and make 200% return, and that's it. And maybe we do a 1031 to some other property that we did make, 8%. So there's a combination of what's available in the market to buy, when your loan's expiring, because that kind of sets it for us. We also will choose our loan based on the timeline we chose on the syndication. So if we say it's a 7-year deal, then we're going to get a 7-year loan. We're not going to do a 3-year loan on a 7-year deal, typically. So we'll choose the duration on the syndication, then we'll choose a corresponding loan. And then when it comes time to exit, we'll then give the investors the option. We'll say, hey guys, this deal has gone great. The last 7 years have been amazing. The property has been absolutely perfect. Maybe there's some upside that we can gain because there's some competition that's come over the years, and we can, do such and such upgrades and bump the rent some more. And so we'll formulate a new business plan at year 7, and it could include several options. One could be just a refinance and continue to hold. It could be a refinance, invest some money back into the property and kick some money back out to the investors, or it could just be an outright sale. And then if it's a sale option, you could be looking at 1031 to another property, or everybody could just be going their own way. So it's, you've got those options on the ladder, and a lot of it will depend on what the initial terms were on the syndication. So that's kind of one avenue which applies to probably 80 and 90% of the time. The other time is when things don't go so great. And I've had this happen before, where this was like on our 3rd transaction. We bought a deal. We thought it was going to be great. And then it just ended up being a lemon. I mean, you've heard of a car being a lemon. This deal was a lemon. It had a ton of internal issues. And for 3 years, we were constantly re-injecting the cash flow back into the deal just to fix all the deferred maintenance items. And so the investors were growing very unhappy. We had done maybe 1 distribution in 3 years. The deal was not going very well. We had also spent over $1 million on capital dollars that we had planned up front. So we were in a bad situation, and the market was doing really well. Fortunately, this was 2015. So we went and we said, okay, let's just sell. So we sold the property, made 200% return, and overnight we became heroes again. So that was good. But for the 3 years up to that, we were not liked very well as the GP. And so that was a situation where we got into this deal. It turned out to be a huge lemon, and ended up selling early. So selling can be a parachute as a way. When you get into a deal and things aren't as what you predicted, you can typically pull your parachute and get out of there and offload to somebody else. And I mean, it's rare you'll lose money these days. I mean, I think you're probably not going to make a lot of money if you are in those situations. We're very fortunate in that situation that we did do an upgrade. We did increase rent a lot. We were just struggling with the cash flow because the property was just constantly breaking down on us. But there are situations where you can exit early and just take a minor penalty basically for exiting early. But you also got to check on your loan. So we had a 3-year loan as well. So that kind of came back to that first example. We were in the situation where our loan came due, and our original plan was to refinance it after the bridge loan and go into permanent debt. And we said, nope, we're not going to do that. We're just going to exit right now. And so we exited right now, and turned into be went from losers to heroes. So,
well, that's a great comparison and parallel of 2 different options there.
mm-hmm.
To turn the question a little bit, when you are ready to sell or getting ready to sell, maybe 6 months or so in advance, what are some things that you do in order to make sure that the sale gets the most that it can?
Yeah, really, you want to start working on the sale 12 months in advance. And then at that point, because remember, a buyer is going to have a trailing 12. So he's looking at your expenses and everything for the last 12 months. Even though he may only look at your income for the last 3 months, he's going to look at all your expenses for the last 12. So 12 months out, you're really going to look at, okay, let's clean this up. Let's burn off the loss to lease. Let's really tighten things up. Let's decrease our expenses. Let's kind of go um, on a diet, so to speak. Let's cut all the frivolous things that we don't need, and really just do everything you can to jack up the NOI, at least for that 12-month duration. And you're almost kind of just flying on just bare minimum, just cruising on the bare minimum you can, just to get across the finish line, and then to get the biggest price you can. And those are some of the things you're going to do. Now, the details will be up to the individual property. I don't know what the property is. Every property's got, they've all got those frivolous things that they can cut out and save money on if they wanted to help push things across.
Yep. And obviously the challenge is to not cut too deep that, the property suffers or the operation suffer or the tenant retention suffers.
Yeah, that's a good point, because if you do it wrong, it's a balance. But if you do it wrong, you can end up in a situation where, say, things are going, you're skirting by for 9 months, and then on months 9 through 12, things just blow up in your face, and then you end up with a huge expense item, and income takes a dive or whatever, which is the absolute worst thing you want to happen when you're about to sell a property, is to have it go through a dive like that 3 months out from hitting the market. So, it's certainly a balance, and but it's you don't overnight decide to sell a property. It's a 12-month process. I mean, it should be a 12-month process.
Right. Yep. Don't want to be in that desperate situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, great. I, again, really appreciate all of these insights you have shared. I think you have, shared a lot of nuggets of information that hopefully people have pulled on. And if this is, I think, an interview that people should go back and listen again, because there are different things from the renovation plans, cost of, or the life cycle of different products that we put into our properties, and things that we track on a monthly basis, weekly basis, lots of different things that you shared, Joseph, that I think are valuable. Before I let you go here, I do have a couple of small questions just so the audience can get to know you a little bit better.
Sure.
So number one would be, why do you get up in the morning?
Because I love it. I love what I do. It's, when I grew up, I've always had a fascination with buildings. I just have. I was originally supposed to be an architect. And after a semester of that, I said, nope, I don't want to do this. So then I went to civil engineering, because I figured if I can't design the building, I can at least hold it up, because that's what civil engineers do. I got a major in structural design. And then 3 months before graduating, I made another kind of about face and went to the oil industry, because Exxon was in town, and the math calculation was pretty easy for me. I was being offered this much to go to a consulting firm and this much to go for Exxon, so I went to Exxon and made the money. And as soon as I had enough money, I bought my first property. And now I've been through the ringer. I've been through kind of the lowest lows of my life, and it was real estate that really pulled me through, and has created this life for me through real estate. And I love that we're able to kind of impact so many people's lives, and by providing a basic need. And then just it's never a dull moment with property management, as you know. I mean, you are coming across all walks of life. Every type of person there is, they find their way coming through an apartment complex, and you get to experience all their personalities and all their glory. And I enjoy getting I don't personally get them, but I do occasionally listen to the voicemails that are left for some of the property managers, and it makes you smile. Sometimes it's a challenging industry on that side of things. And so it's just cool that we can impact so many people on that side. And otherwise, I love it. I got this big dream to grow a big portfolio, and I feel like there's something permanent about buildings. They're a hard asset. They're not going anywhere. And I really just have this aspiration to grow this lasting company that'll be around for for hopefully decades, if not centuries.
Nice, nice. Well, question number 2 in this is, what's a person or event in your history that was monumental in changing and creating who you are today?
Hmm. I would say my grandparents. You know, they were. I've had I had a bit of a rough upbringing. I don't want to really get into it, but I'm just saying I had a bit of a rough upbringing, and so I had a lot of people in my life during different times of my life um, that were parental figures to me. Um, and so during the period of my life when I was kind of exiting college, or sorry, exiting high school, going into college, and then transitioning from college to my career, they were there for me. They were supporting me. They were, they helped me get into college. They helped me, kind of control my ego a little bit, I guess, and really just kind of keep me focused front and center on what I need to accomplish. And I've always had a great respect for them, and also anybody who's of a certain age, who's got a lot of years behind them. I just enjoy listening to people and their experiences, because it's the best way that you can grow as individual is to just take the experiences of somebody else. I mean, it's you're learning from their lessons and they're giving them to you for free, so take them. I mean, why would you want to go and relive their mistakes? So my grandparents were there for me, and they helped me a good bit, and so very, very grateful for them.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, it's good to have family that cares about you there. So wonderful. Okay, well, my last question for you is, how can people get in touch with you if they'd like to learn more about your business?
Yeah, I would say LinkedIn's probably the best option. Joseph Bramante, I'm pretty active on there on a daily basis. The other way is you could just shoot us an email at info@triarcrep, TriArcrep.com. I think last, they could check out our website, www.triarcrep.com, which is actually in the works of getting redone. So hopefully we'll have that done soon. But there's still a lot of good content on the current website.
Okay, wonderful. Well, again, Joseph, I appreciate your time this morning. And I know that our audience will really enjoy hearing all these tips and your experiences that you shared. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thank you, John. Thanks for having me.
All right, and to our audience, thank you for tuning in. If you got anything out of this, why don't you go ahead and comment below, whether you're watching this on YouTube or maybe you are listening on iTunes. You can go ahead and give us a rating and review. That really helps us know that you're out there. It helps other people know that there's great content here, and help us get the word out so that we can grow the show. So thank you so much, and we will see you on the next one. Thank you. Take care.
The opinions shared on this show are for informational purposes only and should not be taken as a solicitation for representation or investment in any specific offering. Please consult with your financial, legal, tax, and real estate advisor before making any investment decisions. John Stiles is a licensed Minnesota real estate agent with Bridge Realty.
Thanks for tuning in to Maximizing Your Property Value, the apartment owner's guide to operating rental properties as a successful business. If you're considering scaling up, downsizing, or right-sizing your real estate investment portfolio, it's important to know how to determine your property's value in today's market. That's why I've put together a free ebook for you called How to Calculate Your Investment Property's Value. To get your copy, go to www.realestatestyles.com/value. Now, if you found any value in today's show, be sure to subscribe to our email newsletter, YouTube channel, and podcast through your favorite podcast player. All the links are in the show notes. And would you do me a big favor? Help me get the word out about this show by sharing with your friends on Facebook and LinkedIn. And lastly, we appreciate your 5-star rating on iTunes. I really appreciate you and wish you the best in your real estate investing career. Signing off, I'm John Stiles with Bridge Realty. Make it a great day.